get this look started, we're going to use a really matte foundation. I'm going to be using Revlon's Color Stay and a blending sponge that's been dampened. I really like using this particular sponge with that particular type of foundation because Color Stay, as in most kind of stay in place foundations, become tacky and dry and kind of hard to work with after a while. So a good way to work with these types of foundation is to get a sponge and dampen it with just plain water. Now with this particular type of sponge, what I like about it is I can really bounce it off of the skin, which will give me a nice flawless, almost airbrushed kind of look. You won't see any brush strokes. It's also really nice because I can apply several layers to different areas of my skin without it starting to look cakey. I really like Revlon's Color Stay because it really does last a long time and it gives the skin a nice matte finish. And reason why I'm choosing this is if you look at Kim Kardashian, she always has a really matte kind of foundation. Now she does love her highlighter, but that's definitely something she always kind of applies after the fact. So just making sure that the skin is nice and even. We're going to work this into any red areas of the face, which for me is like my cheeks and down onto my chin, and then any blemishes as well. Again, if your foundation starts to get kind of sticky, you can always dampen up your sponge and just bounce it over the foundation, and you'll start to see it kind of work back to the wet consistency that you need. Make sure you work it down onto your neck. We don't want any kind of mask-like. And then if you're working with this type of sponge, it's nice because you can use the pointy area to get into those little crevices, like underneath the eye, the inner corner, around the nostrils, and then onto any blemishes that you have. Just make sure you blend everything out. Now on to concealer. For me, I'm using kind of like a highlighter and corrector. Now, I get a lot of questions about concealer, and probably the biggest thing I can say is that it really depends on what your problem areas are. For me, I have bags underneath my eyes, so what I'm going to do is apply the concealer to the shadowy area underneath my eye. And how I can tell where I need to place the concealer is by tilting my head forward and looking directly into a mirror. You should see basically the shadow that's being cast by the bag of your eye. You apply your concealer just to the shadowy area. You don't want to highlight your bag. I'm going to work in several different layers, so when I'm ready to blend after it's set into the skin for a couple of seconds, I use my ring finger and I press and pat the concealer into the skin. You want to use little product as possible, and then after that you can build upon it. The reason you want to work in layers is A, it's not going to look cakey, and B, it's going to last much longer than if you just applied a lot of product at one time. The warmth of your finger is really going to help this kind of press into the skin. After you're done, look, and if you need a little bit more help like I do, you can just go back through and you can start to see where the kind of bags, the shadow, is starting to disappear. Working with a smaller brush will also really help kind of ease the frustration of applying concealer in the right areas. And now it's all worked in. If you need to apply a little bit more, go ahead and do so. I'm going to move on to cheeks using two different types of cream blushes. I'm going to go ahead and mix the two together and apply it with like a flat top kabuki brush. I'm going to apply this to the tops of my cheekbones because if you notice for Kim Kardashian, she doesn't really wear a lot on the apples of her cheeks. It's much higher on her cheekbones, and this way you really emphasize the cheekbones you have. Now she has obviously awesome cheekbones, but this will help us get a little bit more kind of higher cheekbone effect by applying it right to the tops and working it down. You want to apply in a stippling motion because if you kind of swirl the brush around, you're going to disturb the foundation that you've placed underneath that blush. I love working with cream blushes because they stay in place all day long and they kind of give a nice glow to the skin, which is why I chose it in this particular tutorial. But sometimes it can be a little tricky to work with, so use a little bit at first and then go back and add more if you need to, and make sure you stipple. If you need to blend out a little bit, take your sponge from your foundation and just blend around it. I'm going to go ahead and now move on to powdering the skin. I'm going to mix two colors together since obviously I don't have Kim's skin tone. And a nice fluffy brush, I'm going to press the powder into my skin. You don't want to swirl it around on your face, otherwise you're just going to disturb the foundation underneath, and all that hard work to make you look nice and flawless is going to go down the drain. So take your powder and just kind of fluff it and press it onto the skin. Obviously the areas you want to concentrate most on is going to be the center of your face and anywhere you might get red or oily. Make sure you kind of get to the areas where you have spots. I like to apply a little bit of my concealer for my spots after my powder because I think it adheres to the skin a little bit better with the texture of the powder. So I use a small art detailer brush. This is something I picked up at the craft store. I love it because it's just the kind of size of like a pimple or a spot, so you can get right to where you need it. Then take your favorite loose powder and apply that underneath the eye area in a generous amount. Now I'm using a powder that's a little bit lighter than what I normally would for my skin because it's a great way to get that nice glowy look underneath the eye without using shimmer. And it's also a great way to catch any fallout that you might have after you apply your eyeshadow. And then it just can be swept away after you're done. Start with a nice shimmery base and apply this to the eyelid and just a little bit above the crease. I like to use my finger to work these kind of creams in because I think it helps kind of thin it out a little bit. Then use your favorite kind of blue with a purple undertone and your crease brush and just apply that starting at the outer V and work that into the crease area all the way to the inner corner of the eye. Not going quite all the way to the inner corner of the eye, and then bring it down in a diagonal kind of to the outer V area, like if you're connecting your crease to your lower lash line. And just use small circles and windshield wiper motions to apply the color. Remember again, less is more here. You don't want to apply a bunch of product and then have to spend, minutes kind of blending it out. Just use small layers. And just make sure you're connecting that outer V down towards kind of your lower lash line, but keeping the majority of your lid space free of color. This is going to give your eyes quite a bit of definition and give you the nice emphasis on your eyes without being too dramatic. Using a blending brush, go back through and just make sure you don't have any harsh lines. Try and keep your blending to the upper area of where you've placed the shadow because you don't really want to wipe away all the hard work you've done. But you want it to look nice and seamless where you can't see where the color starts and where the color stops. Then I went back through and added a little bit more color if you need to. Taking a black liner pencil, apply this to your water lines. Make sure you go all the way from the inner corner of the tear duct all the way to the outer corner of the eye. If you can do your upper water line, I would do that as well. And then kind of work it just a little bit onto the lower lash line. Take a nice smudger brush, nice and small, and then smudge that liner that you've just placed down further onto the lower lashes. Now for her everyday look, she just kind of wears it just to her lower lashes, maybe a little bit underneath. If you wanted to vamp this up a little bit more, you could bring the smudging even lower. That's typically the more smoky the eye, the more lower the eyeshadow or liner is smudged on the lower lash line. Since I have small eyes, I'm definitely not going to do too much or too dark at the edge. So just kind of work it back and forth, and it should just look nice and kind of even underneath the eyes. I find that the Stilo ones are really, really nice and smudgy, so it helps and does the job very easily. Then taking a nice matte black shadow and an angled brush, you're going to want to take the black shadow and place it onto your upper lash line. You kind of want to press the shadow in as opposed to kind of drawing a line. This is going to do a couple things. One, it's going to add a little bit more dimension to the look. And then two, it's going to make your lashes look much, much thicker without having that obvious harsh line of a liquid liner or, a pencil liner. The other great thing about using an eyeshadow is that it's not going to smudge throughout the day. Now try and feather that color up into the blue that we placed down. And then you can add a little bit more blue or a little bit more black just to kind of deepen the outer V, because we want that outer V to be the darkest area of the entire eye. Then make sure your outer V is connected with your lower lash line. And then blend around just to make sure everything looks nice and even. Take your favorite shimmery eyeshadow and apply this to the inner corner with a small pencil brush. This is going to open up the eyes, and just to have when the light catches the inner portion of your eye, it's really going to light up. And also apply it to your lid area. That space that we kept free and clear is where you want to apply that color. Now Kim has very, very defined brows, something that I very, very much lack. So I'm going to go back through with a brow pencil and really thicken mine up and probably extend the edge of my eyebrow and make it a little bit longer. This is really going to frame your smoky eye. Now, whenever I need to kind of thicken my eyebrows up, which is pretty much like every time, after I fill my eyebrow, I just kind of extend the top part of my eyebrow just a little bit more, and that's where I really kind of thicken things up. And make sure you extend the tail. You don't want to have an eyebrow that stops short of your eye, otherwise it'll look a little strange. Then taking a fluffy brush, just go ahead and sweep out any of the excess shadow or any fallout that came underneath your eye. And now we can start on a bronzer. Using a big fluffy brush, I'm just kind of liberally applying it to my forehead and also to my cheek area, kind of the tops and bottoms of my cheek, my jawline. And then I'm going to go back through and contour, really putting a little bit more kind of effort and detail underneath my cheekbones, like in the hollowed areas, and then kind of on my jawline and to my nose, which you see here. Taking a small kind of flat brush, I'm going to go back through and kind of put the dimension back into my nose, because whenever you use a flat foundation, it really can flatten out your whole entire face. So you want to go back through and emphasize your features. So here I'm just going down along the bridge of my nose, and then on the sides of my nostrils and right underneath my nose as well. Start off using a little bit less, and then you can always build more. Otherwise, you're just going to end up having like a kind of muddy, dirty nose. Using more of an illuminating type of powder, I'm going to go right also to the shadows and that my bags create underneath my eyes. It's just going to give me a little bit extra lift and glow. For her classic nude lip, I'm going to go ahead and use a flesh-toned lip pencil and line all the way from the outer corner of my lips all the way across, but leaving the very center area bare and free of color. And that's just going to give your lips a little bit more fullness. A light pink lipstick, and go all over the areas that we laid down our lip liner. And then top that with a nice kind of shimmery gloss. It's really going to make your lips look a little bit more full. If you really need some help in this area, make sure you go from the outer corner of your lips all the way to the center, like I'm doing right here, because it's really going to emphasize your lips and make them look nice and luscious. You can even add a little bit of shimmer powder to the center of your bottom lip and then right above your cupid's bow. Any eyeshadow or shimmering powder will help you do this. And it's just going to really highlight that area. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this. Please rate, comment, and subscribe.